The night it all started didn't feel unusual. I was just stepping out onto my porch, enjoying the quiet after a long day, when I heard footsteps. Fast, irritated, and coming straight toward my house. Before I could even turn fully, 2 HOA board members marched up my driveway like they owned the entire neighborhood. One held a clipboard like it was a weapon. The other kept staring as if he was inspecting a problem no one else could see. I didn't even get a hello. Just one sharp question. Why haven't you responded to our HOA notices? I told them the truth, simple, honest. I'm not in your HOA. Their reaction didn't match the sentence. The woman's eyes widened like I'd confessed to a crime, and the man stepped closer, almost offended. He said I had to be in the HOA if I lived on this street. I repeated myself, slower this time, but that only made things worse. Their frustration turned into something more aggressive, like my answer threatened the very ground they were standing on. They stormed off, angry and muttering under their breath. I figured that was it. Some misunderstanding, maybe a mistake in paperwork or a wrong address. But 5 minutes later, blue and red lights flashed across my living room walls. The HOA had actually called the cops because I dared to say I wasn't part of their precious association. I walked outside, confused but calm. The officer stepped out, hand resting near his belt, eyes scanning me like he was trying to remember something. The HOA members stood behind him, arms folded, confident now that backup had arrived. I expected questions, ID, address verification, maybe even some awkward apologies once things were cleared up. But that's not what happened. The officer took one good look at me and froze. His expression shifted in a way that didn't match the situation at all. Recognition, shock, almost concern. The HOA members noticed it too. Their smirks faded as the officer asked me a question I didn't expect. Not about the HOA, not about a complaint, not about anything they wanted him there for. It was something entirely different, something they weren't prepared to hear. And in that moment, they realized they had just made the biggest mistake possible. Because I wasn't just a neighbor refusing to join their HOA. I was someone they never imagined I could be. And the truth was about to hit them harder than any rule they ever tried to enforce. The officer stepped a little closer, and the street fell so silent I could hear the soft hum of the patrol car behind him. The HOA board members shifted nervously, waiting for him to confirm whatever story they had cooked up. But the officer didn't look at them. He kept his eyes on me, studying my face like he was trying to place a memory. You're the new owner of the lakeside parcels, right? He finally asked. The HOA president's jaw dropped. The woman with the clipboard took a step back. They hadn't expected that. Not even close. And honestly, neither had I. I hadn't planned on telling anyone yet. I had only found out a few days earlier when I received an unexpected letter from a law firm representing an older landlord who had passed away. He'd left behind several small but valuable pieces of land scattered around the community, including one that directly controlled access to the very HOA that was now trying to threaten me. I didn't know the man personally, but my dad had helped him years ago, back when we were struggling. Maybe that small kindness stayed with him longer than we ever realized. The inheritance came with responsibilities, confusing paperwork, and more power than I understood, but I never imagined it would become a weapon in a neighborhood argument. The HOA had built a reputation for being strict, obsessed with rules, constantly patrolling, acting like they ran the world. Neighbors whispered that they fined people for leaving trash cans out for an extra hour or for using the wrong shade of white on their garage doors. I didn't think much of it until they came after me. And now the cop, who clearly knew more about property law than the HOA wanted him to, was unintentionally confirming something they feared. The land I inherited wasn't just land. It was leverage. It meant they couldn't make a move without affecting property tied directly to me. I could see panic creeping across their faces, but they tried to hide it behind stiff shoulders and crossed arms. "Officer," the HOA president said tightly, "he's refusing to comply with our rules. He's not cooperating." The officer didn't even look at him. He asked me quietly, "Did they know who you were before they called us?" I shook my head. The officer let out a slow breath, almost like he already knew the storm that was about to hit them. And for the first time that night, I realized things were about to get a lot more complicated than a simple HOA complaint. The HOA president tried to regain control of the moment, clearing his throat and stepping forward with forced confidence. But his voice cracked just enough to show the panic hiding underneath. The officer noticed it. I noticed it. And the neighbors slowly coming out onto their porches noticed it too. That's when everything started spiraling in a direction none of us expected. The woman with the clipboard suddenly began flipping through her papers, scanning frantically for something. Anything that would prove they had authority over me. Her hands shook more with each page she turned. The streetlights above cast long shadows on her face, making every moment feel heavier. The president whispered something to her, but she shook her head, eyes widening like she had just realized something important and terrifying. Meanwhile, the officer asked me to step aside with him for a second. His voice was calm, but there was a tension underneath it, like he was choosing his words carefully. "You need to know," he said quietly. "The HOA has been pushing boundaries with several residents. Complaints, fines, even situations where they tried to take property they didn't legally control. So this wasn't about me. This was part of a bigger pattern, a power struggle they'd been escalating for months." But before I could respond, one of my neighbors approached us hesitantly. A middle-aged man, tired eyes, hands in his pockets. He leaned toward me and whispered, "They came after my wife last month, over a garden pot." A garden pot. His voice cracked with embarrassment and something like guilt. I didn't stand up to them then. Maybe I should have. That hit me harder than I expected. A small moral weight landed on my shoulders. Was this becoming my responsibility now? Did I owe it to everyone here to do something with the authority I never asked for? But before I could answer that question in my mind, another subplot slid into the chaos. A black SUV pulled slowly into the street. The HOA president stiffened immediately, and the woman with the clipboard straightened her posture like a child caught misbehaving. Whoever was inside that SUV mattered. A lot. The officer subtly shifted his stance, hand resting near his belt again. Not threatening, but alert. I felt a cold ripple run through the air. The rear door opened. A tall woman stepped out, dressed sharply, moving with a confidence that made everyone fall silent. I didn't know her, but the HOA did. Their expressions said everything. Something about her presence, her calm, her timing, felt intentional, like she'd been waiting for the perfect moment to appear. And as she walked toward us, her eyes locked on mine, and the look she gave me wasn't fear. It was recognition, like she already knew exactly who I was and what was coming next. The woman from the SUV stopped just a few feet away, her heels clicking softly against the pavement. The sound shouldn't have felt threatening, but somehow it did. She looked at the officer first, offering a polite nod, then turned her attention to the HOA president and the trembling woman with the clipboard. No one spoke. Everyone waited. Finally, she exhaled slowly and said, "You two really made a mess tonight." Her tone wasn't loud, but it carried enough sharpness to make both of them flinch. The president tried to defend himself. "We were just enforcing HOA rules." She cut him off with a raised hand. "Rules don't protect you from consequences. Especially not tonight." The officer stepped slightly between us, not in a defensive way, but like he could sense the tension about to break open. I felt it too. A pressure building in the air, something waiting to be revealed. She finally turned toward me. "You must be him," she said softly. My heart kicked a little. "Who exactly do you think I am?" She smiled. Not warmly, not threateningly. More like someone who has been watching a puzzle fall together piece by piece. Before she answered, she reached into her bag and pulled out a thin folder. She handed it to the officer first. He flipped through the pages quickly, and his eyes widened just a fraction. Enough to confirm the stakes had just risen. I leaned a little forward, trying to read his expression. He whispered, "This changes everything." The HOA president stepped closer, voice rising. "What is that? Let me see. I have the right." "No," she said firmly. "You don't." The woman with the clipboard looked like she was about to faint. "I told you," she whispered to the president. We shouldn't have pushed him. We shouldn't have. Her voice trailed off, swallowed by fear. The SUV woman continued, calm and precise. There are documents you failed to review, land rights you overlooked, and an ownership clause that predates your entire HOA. My stomach tightened. So she knew. She knew everything. But the HOA didn't. Yet, the officer glanced at me again, like he was waiting for my reaction. But I couldn't find any words. The woman stepped even closer. This isn't just about your membership, she said. It's about control. And tonight, they just lost it. The HOA president lunged toward the folder. The officer blocked him instantly. The street erupted with gasps. And just as the president opened his mouth to shout, the woman leaned in, whispered something to him, something so quiet I barely heard it. But I saw his face drain of color in an instant. Whatever she told him, whatever truth she finally uncovered, it was big enough to break him. And the real shock, she hadn't even revealed the worst part yet. The HOA president staggered back after hearing her whispered words, his face pale, his confidence shattered. For a moment, he looked less like the man who had marched onto my property with threats, and more like someone who had just watched his entire world tilt sideways. But before anyone could ask what she'd said, the woman from the SUV closed the folder, tucked it under her arm, and turned toward me with an expression that felt conflicted, almost protective, almost guilty. I wasn't supposed to be here tonight, she said quietly. But when they made the call, I knew things were going to get out of control. Who are you? I asked again, this time more firmly. Before she could answer, the clipboard woman snapped. Her voice cracked under the pressure. Tell him. Just tell him already. He deserves to know. Everyone froze. The SUV woman's jaw tightened. She wasn't expecting that. The HOA president shot the clipboard woman a sharp look. But she didn't care anymore. The fear had swallowed whatever loyalty she once had. The officer stepped closer, hand near his belt again. Ma'am, what exactly does he need to know? The SUV woman sighed. Slow, heavy, defeated. She reached into her bag again and pulled out one more document. But this one wasn't for the officer. She handed it directly to me. My name was on the front, and another name beneath it. A name I recognized instantly. A name I never expected to see connected to this place. My father's. The SUV woman watched my reaction closely. He wasn't just helping the old landlord years ago, she said. He was part of the original ownership group, before the HOA even existed, before any of these laws or rules were written. My chest tightened. What are you saying? She took a deep breath. I'm saying the land you inherited wasn't random. It wasn't kindness. It wasn't luck. It was a transfer of power your father was supposed to receive decades ago. But someone, she glanced at the HOA president, blocked it. The officer's eyes snapped to the president. So this was intentional? The HOA president didn't deny it. He just stared at the ground, trembling. The SUV woman continued, voice harder now. They hid documents. They manipulated filings. They kept your family out because they knew what the land rights meant. If your father had taken control back then, this entire HOA would have been under him. A wave of disbelief washed over me. My father, quiet, humble, hardworking, never said a word. And they buried it. For years. But the twist didn't end there. The clipboard woman stepped forward, voice shaking. You think the president acted alone? She pointed behind me, toward the houses, toward the neighbors watching. He wasn't the only one hiding things. The SUV woman's head snapped toward her. What are you doing? The clipboard woman ignored her. Someone else knew. Someone you trust. Someone who's been pretending to be on your side. My breath caught. What do you mean? Who? She opened her mouth, ready to expose a secret that would change everything again. But before she could speak, a porch light flicked on across the street. A silhouette stepped forward. Someone I recognized. Someone who should never have been part of this. And the look on their face told me one thing. The real betrayal had only just begun. The silhouette across the street stepped into the light, and my stomach dropped. It was Mr. Alden, the quiet, friendly neighbor who always waved when I drove by. The man who brought cookies when I first moved in. The one person I never suspected of anything. But the look on his face, it wasn't friendly now. It was resigned, exposed. He walked toward us slowly, hands slightly raised, as if he already knew there was no point pretending anymore. The officer shifted toward him, and the SUV woman narrowed her eyes. The HOA president looked almost relieved, like he finally had someone else to share the blame with. Mr. Alden stopped a few steps away. "I never meant for any of this to reach you," he said quietly. "Or your father." My heart hammered. "What did you do?" He sighed deeply, shoulders sinking. "I was the one who advised the HOA to bury those ownership documents. Years ago, I told them that if your father ever took control, they'd lose everything. The power, the influence, the money they were pulling from this community." The clipboard woman nodded. "He was the one who taught them how to hide it." Alden swallowed hard. "I knew your father. He was a good man, but he didn't want trouble. When he started asking questions, I convinced him to stop. The world tilted. My father trusted him, and he used that trust to keep him quiet." The SUV woman stepped forward, anger tightening her voice. "You manipulated him. You manipulated all of this." Alden didn't deny it, but he did look at me with something close to regret. "When your father passed, I thought the truth would stay buried forever. Didn't, and now everything was unraveling at once." The officer glanced at me. "This is your call. You have the legal authority now. More than any of them." The HOA president looked terrified. The clipboard woman looked ready to collapse. Alden looked hollow. For a moment, I just stood there, overwhelmed by the weight of what I had inherited. Not just land, but a legacy, a responsibility, and a truth that had been stolen from my family. I finally spoke. "I'm not going to cover up what happened. Not like you did." I looked at Alden. "This community deserves better. My father deserved better." The SUV woman nodded softly. "And the HOA?" I looked directly at the president. Calm, steady, in control in a way he never expected. "As of tonight," I said, "your authority is suspended. The land you operate on falls under my ownership. And until we rebuild this properly, the HOA is dissolved." Gasps rippled down the street. The officer stepped back, letting the moment settle like a final verdict. For the first time, the president didn't argue. He couldn't. Alden closed his eyes, accepting the consequences he'd avoided for decades. But just as the tension began to ease, the SUV woman touched my arm lightly. "There's one more thing," she said. Her voice softened in a way that made my chest tighten again. She pulled out a small envelope. Old, worn, my father's handwriting on the front. He left this for whoever finally uncovered the truth. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single line, short, simple, and devastating. "Son. When the time comes, stand your ground. This land was always meant to return to you. And in that moment, everything made sense. This wasn't just a fight with an HOA. It was the ending of something broken, and the beginning of something my father had trusted me to finish." The street finally began to quiet down as the neighbors drifted back toward their homes, whispering among themselves about everything that had just unfolded. The flashing police lights faded. The officer finished his statements, and the SUV woman stayed beside me while the night settled into something calmer, almost reflective. The HOA president didn't fight the decision. Maybe he was too shocked, or maybe some part of him always knew this day would come. The clipboard woman handed over every document she had, almost relieved to be free of the pressure she'd been living under. And Mr. Alden, he didn't run, didn't argue, didn't defend himself. He simply accepted the consequences. A lifetime of secrets had finally caught up to him. Standing there with my father's letter in my hand, I felt something unexpected. Clarity. This land, this neighborhood, this fight, it wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving the HOA wrong. It was about restoring something my father believed in: fair treatment, respect, and the simple right for people to feel safe in their own homes. The SUV woman, Emily, as she finally introduced herself, helped me gather the last of the papers. "You have a lot of decisions ahead," she said, voice softer now. "But you handled tonight better than most people would." "I don't feel like I handled anything," I admitted with a small laugh. She smiled. "That's how you know you did." In the days that followed, I met with the community. I explained the truth about the ownership, the buried documents, the power the HOA had abused for years. And instead of fear or anger, what I got was support. People wanted change. Real change. We rebuilt the neighborhood system from scratch. Transparent rules. Shared decision-making. A place where power wasn't a weapon, but a responsibility. And for the first time in a long time, the street felt like a community again. Kids played outside. People waved without suspicion. The weight that had hung over the neighborhood slowly lifted. And me? I finally understood the message my father left behind. Stand your ground. Not just in conflict, but in purpose. His legacy wasn't land. It was courage. Looking back now, I realize everything that happened, every confrontation, every secret exposed, led to a single truth. Sometimes life hands you a fight you never asked for, because you're the only one who can finish it the right way. So if you're watching this and you're dealing with pressure, unfair treatment, or someone trying to take advantage of you, remember this. You don't have to start the conflict to be the one who ends it with integrity. And if this story hit you in any way, hit that like button, subscribe, and stick around. Because the next story, well, that one's just beginning.